Today, I want to talk about something that's been on my mind for years now. Not a lot of people totally understand what I'm getting at when I try to compare these two bass players, these two bassists and singers. They are both lead singers and bassists. I'm going to make an attempt to give you guys some examples, like to give you sound examples of why I feel these two bass players and singers are pretty similar in a weird way. They're totally different, the music that they do. But let me go on and get to the point. I'm talking about Mark King and Peter Cetera. I'm telling you, these guys totally remind me of each other. And I'm sorry, Mark King reminds me of Peter Cetera so much. On a different level, but it's not about that anyway. These guys both have very distinctive voices. They lend their voices to their music in such a way that it just hooks listeners. People love to hear them sing. I just think that typically if my wife likes the music, she loved Level 42. From the moment she started hearing their song, she's like, wow, she enjoys hearing their music whenever I play it around the house. And of course I put the music on her phone so she can listen to it. She also, not as much, but she likes, let's just say, the 80s Peter Cetera version of Chicago. She enjoys hearing those songs as well. Now, me personally, once I started to learn or know who Chicago was, I didn't like them at first. And Peter Cetera really got on my nerves, which is kind of funny for me to say that right now. But I did not like them at all. And then one day I heard one of their songs. And honestly, I really can't remember exactly which song it was, but this was somewhere in the mid 80s. I was over at a friend's house and his mom was a big soft rock listener. She used to love to listen to, of course, Peter Cetera, Chicago, Player, Bread, the list goes on. But she loved that era, like Christopher Cross era of soft rock, as they call it. I did not like this stuff at first. Now, today, I absolutely love it. But when I was at that age in the 80s, I was such a huge fan of metal and aggressive music and punk, that mostly metal, that I just couldn't wrap my head around why anyone would listen to that stuff. But now when I hear it, I get so nostalgic and I think back to, when I was young, and I remember our parents used to love this music, and you'd hear this music playing. It was like the soundtrack of your life, and I heard a lot of that music growing up. So now when I hear that stuff, and there's so much of it, there's so many different genres of music and so many different artists and singers that I heard growing up as a kid, that when I hear that stuff now, it just brings me so much comfort. It soothes my soul in a way that I cannot explain at all. And I feel like Peter Cetera, who I like to call Sweet Pete, and Mark King, they just have these vocals that make you feel good, in my opinion. The more I listen to them, I just can't get tired of them. I just keep listening to them. And I think that there's a weird similarity. There's certain songs that Level 42 has that really remind me of Chicago, when those guys would take turns singing parts of the verses in the songs. And what's even more interesting to me is that Level 42, they're like a white man's, I hate using that because I really feel like soul has no color. I feel like no matter what race you are, doesn't matter. If your music is good and your music has soul, it has feel, it doesn't matter what race you are. I'm so sick of that, you know? So let me take that back, what I just said. And oddly enough, too, I mean, or here's a fun fact, Verdine White produced Standing in the Light, which was released in 1983. Verdine White from Earth, Wind & Fire co-produced or produced one of the Level 42 records, one of their earlier albums. And I always thought from the moment I heard the very first track, which is Turn It On the first Level 42 album, I was like, wow, this is Earth, Wind & Fire. These guys sound just like Earth, Wind & Fire, but they're a little bit more 80s. Earth, Wind & Fire, they did a good job of crossing over from the 70s into the 80s. They really did. They did a great job. You know, they have so many hits like Let's Groove and all stuff like that. So as I was editing this video today, by the way, this must be the most interrupted video edit that I've ever dealt with in my life. Like, it took me no time at all to film the initial video, but editing all of this material and putting it together and dealing with just life in general while I've been trying to get this thing released has been insane. So anyway, to my point, I totally left out the part to where I mentioned the glue. It's the most important part of this video because I'm sitting here talking so much about Level 42 and Chicago, and mainly Mark King as a bassist and vocalist and Peter Cetera as a vocalist and bassist. But I didn't talk about the glue, the constant between the two. Of course, it's their influence, the jazz, soul influence that they have, blues, but then also that funk feel, at least from Level 42's end. But their bridge and their constant is none other than Earth, Wind & Fire. And I just completely left that out of the video. Like, everything, the story I had to tell you about when I was outside of a venue and Chicago and Earth, Wind & Fire were playing together. This was like a decade or so ago, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, man, like, these guys sound great together. Well, I found some of that footage and I put it in here. You will know when I release this video if the actual footage gets cut out or it's muted, then you will know that it was because I got another copyright claim and I had to pull it out. The thing I just cannot get away from all the time, whenever I hear Mark King sing and I hear some of these songs, I'm like, gosh, I just can't help but think about Peter Cetera. He's just like this upgraded version of Peter Cetera. Doesn't mean that he's better than Peter Cetera. I'm not here to argue or discuss who's the better bass player. I mean, some of you or most of you are probably, if you know anything about bass, you're going to automatically just say, well, Mark King's the better bassist. You know, I think that if you give Peter Cetera some room, I think he could shred the bass as well. He's a great player. Like, I've seen so much live footage of him playing. The dude's badass, and he's a great bassist who can also sing, which isn't always easy to do, especially if you do not practice. So if you're a bassist who really wants to sing, my advice to you is to keep practicing it, because it used to be so much easier for me to do when I was younger. I had the easiest time playing bass and singing along while I was playing bass. It's so much harder to do when you stop practicing. So if that's one thing I could share with you, please do not stop singing and playing, because they go hand in hand very well together. But because bass, you're also focusing on melody and as well as rhythm, it's very tricky when you're trying to sing and play. It's why it's so much easier to play guitar and sing, or even play keyboards and sing, and even play drums and sing. But bass is like combining all those worlds, and then you're also trying to sing over it. It can be tricky. This is why I have so much respect for people like Mark King, Les Claypool. The list goes on, but these guys who play bass and they sing at the same time, it's just really not always as easy. You know, Geddy Lee. I mean, these guys are highly acclaimed or highly revered for a reason. These guys they're just on another level of their talent. It just cannot be understated, really. Either way, I'm going to show you guys some examples here and show you why I feel like Mark King is this strange sort of doppelganger of a person for Peter Cetera. There's just something about their styles. I'm planning to use live footage, but I just want you guys to see what I'm talking about. curious, what do you guys think? Do you feel like Mark King gets any inspiration or influence at all from Peter Cetera? Or do you think, I mean, just let me know what you think. What do you think of these two guys? Who would you take over the other? I'm curious. I want to know. Please leave your comments below and I will talk to you guys in the next video, or I will chat with you in the comments and I will have another video out to you soon. Thanks for watching.